May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And that is why I wanted to bring this conversation to you because I wanted to bring awareness of what living with burnout means to not only those who are struggling to cope and survive every day, but to their families as well. We're going to be sharing stories today that could seem a little extreme to you, but they are definitely real and it happens in our society. And I feel it's very important and my duty to bring awareness to the issue, not only because I'm a burnout survivor, but because I know many people are struggling in silence. Welcome to Leading Intentionally, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of leadership transformation. I am Carmen Paredes, your guide in this journey, and I'm so thrilled to have you with us today. In each episode, we share strategies, insights, and stories to help you drive growth, enhance workplace culture, and lead with intentionality. Whether you are a seasoned executive, an aspired leader, or just someone passionate about positivity in the workplace, this podcast is for you. Each week, I'll bring you conversations with thought leaders, experts, and trailblazers that will share with you their insights, wisdom, and experiences so that you can apply these practical tips to your leadership journey. Get ready to explore topics like inclusive leadership, women's empowerment, effective communication, and so much more. If you're ready to lead intentionally and make lasting impact in your organization, you are in the right place. Let's embark in this transformative leadership journey together. This is Leading Intentionally. Let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode of Leading Intentionally. Today, my guest, Carlie Sturtz. She was born September 13, 1997. Carlie is an earthly, creative, and spirited young woman with a heart that yearns to give back. When she lost her father to suicide in December 2019, she knew that she had to make a difference by turning her pain into purpose to help others. She's a mental health advocate, speaker, and writer. You can find her at her blog, Bloomie Brained, and I'm going to put the links on the description of the podcast. Bloomie Brained is a phrase that she created and trademarked that simply means to stay open-minded and to keep growing. She believes that humans do not grow old, but when they stop growing, they do become old. Carlie wrote and designed Becoming Bloomie Brained, Your Guide to Self-Care, a wellness self-care book that doubles as a journal to help support her mental health initiatives. She's currently working on a grant with Pollination Project, where she gets to donate roughly 150 copies to children and teens struggling with their mental health. Thank you and welcome to the show today, Carlie.
Thank you so much for having me, Carmen. This is super cool.
I am so excited to have this conversation because I think it's very important, especially during this month, where everyone is open to hear about these topics,
Yes,
to bring
absolutely.
awareness, right? To bring awareness on how bad it could get on the other side.
Absolutely. And, even for the families of just learning how to recognize maybe could this loved one do something so extreme?
Yeah. So, I mean, we already mentioned your dad's suicide, and I think it would be appropriate just to start there because I always like to start with my guest story, right? And that is the core of the story that we're gonna use today to help educate our audiences. So, would you mind sharing a little bit of, how you get here with this purpose that so beautiful that you have, and
Yeah.
um, how what happened and how you were able to turn the wheels for you, right? Because it's a situation that I only imagine that has
Mhm.
to be so difficult to overcome.
Absolutely. And thank you for your kind words. To kind of paint the backstory for you and for everyone, my dad's personality was larger than life. I mean, total just like Robin Williams of a man, also someone you would never expect to do that. He owned his own real estate company and his own building company, which were pivots post the 2008-2009 economy. He was a telecom engineer before that. So he has always been super motivated to just, pick things up and keep going. And I do not think that there was enough emphasis on sometimes taking time to relax and avoid burnout by focusing on his mental health. 2019, these were kind of pre-mental health focused times, right? All of that really didn't start to set in and become implemented until post-COVID, or kind of at the height of COVID. So the signs were there for about 6 months leading up to what would be his suicide. I definitely noticed a little bit of lack of vigor for life. I noticed sometimes, because I think that the eyes are kind of the windows of the soul, and the eyes are very telling. He would be there, but he didn't always seem very present. So I didn't realize at the time what was going on with his business, and he was having financial struggles in his business. And, so him and my mom kept that kind of private, as he didn't want to scare or worry his children. And so I certainly see so many benefits there of, you don't want to worry your kids. But now looking back, I wish that he would have humanized himself a little bit more, because I think this is such a great thing as well for kids to know. No matter what age you are, you can be somebody's child at 50, 60 years old. I think that it's very important to break the cycle of looking at your parent, almost giving them a God complex or like a superhero effect to them. I mean, in our hearts, they're always going to be our superheroes, our number ones, right? But when we dehumanize them a little bit, it certainly makes it seem like, okay, well, nothing's wrong with them. Their dad, their mom, they're good. They're always going to be good. In retrospect, I wish that I would have asked more, just, how are you, Dad? Like, how are you feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Those questions were never there. And he certainly did such a great job of always being happy. The 2 months leading up to his death, I started to have little inklings, like, my mom started expressing to me their financial struggles, and things were really bad. So I did start reaching out a little bit more. But, I guess it was a little bit of pride and ego of not wanting to share that with me. So he would just completely write it off and, and say, I'm good. How are you? So again, with that whole superhero effect, I trusted what he said. I thought that he was good. Again, he was larger than life, somebody that I would never in a million years expect to do this. But my family, we had a life insurance policy, and I believe it did cover suicide. And I think he saw that as an out. If I'm being completely honest, I think he saw, okay, if I leave my family, I will be leaving them with this life insurance policy to help erase some of the debts and get back on track financially. And I think for anybody to think that way is so sad, because, all day long, we would have rather, as a family, have lost the material things, lost the house, lost this, lost that. I would have lived in a box with him on the side of the street, but when you're so tuned in to how can I make things right, how can I get my family out of this situation, you are certainly more inclined to making a permanent decision based on temporary emotions. And it's certainly interesting, because had he have just held on a little bit longer, like 3 of his houses ended up selling a few months later. And then like the rates for things like the housing economy was doing really well through COVID. So that's why I put so much emphasis on that temporary state of mind that he was in. And it's certainly so tragic to think about. But I do think that if there had been more emphasis at the time on avoiding burnout, he could have implemented more things in his life, things that I speak to the youth about today, you know, more exercise, more journaling, um, more meditation. And I know to some adults, especially men, some of those things can seem a little bit maybe frilly or feathery. But you would be so surprised just journaling alone, how it puts you so in touch with these inner deep emotions that maybe you didn't know were in there, but they certainly heighten your self-awareness. And this is where my initiatives began. Is I recognized post losing my father that, in this life, it is, while it was terrible what happened to him, and oh my gosh, if I could do anything to change it, I absolutely would. But I noticed that the suicide rates for children were just at an all-time high, like teenagers during the pandemic. And in this life, I think it's expected to lose a parent before God forbid, anybody ever lose a child. So my initiatives kind of shifted to suicide prevention in teens, just because what I saw my grandma and grandpa go through after losing my father to suicide. I just don't think it's something any parent or family should ever have to go through. And I really wanted to help the youth of today to make sure that they're not making a permanent decision out of a temporary state of mind. And certainly in the day and age of social media and things being right at their fingertips, and bullying following you home because now it's on your cellular device, I just definitely wanted to do my part in giving back.
Yeah, no, that is so inspiring what you're doing, because unfortunately I have few friends whose children had committed suicide, and you would never love anybody like you love your kids.
Yeah,
And the thought of that happening is heartbreaking. And
absolutely.
I cannot even imagine what would that feel like, right? And
Yeah,
in many cases, they have to pretend that they are strong, which is, is affecting their own mental health because they have other children. And so you have to like kind of
yeah,
still, hold the fort for everybody else. But the fact that, I love when you said making a permanent decision with temporary situations, because what happens is when you are in a place where your mind is foggy with,
mhm,
overwork or depression or um, sadness, right? Failure, feeling like you fail people. You are not rational. You cannot think straight. And it takes a lot to get out of that. And so I have had postpartum depression.
mhm.
So I know what it feels like. Well, everyone will be better off if I don't wake up tomorrow.
Yeah,
And right. And so thankfully, I never got to the point where I was even fantasizing on how I would do that. But
yeah,
the fact that I had intrusive thoughts like that, as I
mhm.
have, brand new babies, was scary. So I was aware enough to know that I shouldn't be having these thoughts,
Yeah,
but not strong enough to stop them. And then the problem is that the traditional remedies that Western medicine give us
oh
have
yeah,
they don't have pretty side effects. So I remember when I was told that my options, the medications, right, had
yeah,
side effects that I didn't want in my life. I'm like, no. So, and then it comes the stigma of asking for help, which, you're talking about men, but what happened also is that is I find that is people who live in their masculine energy. So I was always a provider. I was an executive. I was, I needed to be strong.
Yeah.
And so even though I'm a woman, I was living in that masculine energy of providing.
Yeah.
And asking for help was probably the most vulnerable thing I could have done. And I was so ashamed that I needed help.
Yeah. And
And
most people do
right.
experience.
And so it doesn't seem rational when you are fully connected and grounded and healed and well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what goes to the mind of someone who is desperate to, right, to not suffer.
Absolutely. And I've been very interested recently just in theology, because I do think that if my father had a little bit more faith, he would still be here. And, faith in whatever you want to believe in, just
Mhm.
faith in something.
Mhm.
And I've been studying recently how pride truly is the root of all evil. And I said to one of my relatives, or they said to me, they said, I really think your father, he couldn't bear the thought of another bankruptcy, because when he was let go in 2008 from his telecom engineering job, we did go through a bankruptcy then. Those things last about 10 years. And he was just freshly out of it that year. And the thought of going in again, and that does translate to pride, that does translate
Mhm.
to that ego a little bit. And I do think that when you separate self, when you separate spirit from pride and from ego, you're living in a much healthier space, because truly it shouldn't matter what other people think. I like to tell my younger sisters a lot, their opinion of you, or whoever's opinion of you, is truthfully none of your business. But sometimes in life we have to do what is going to be best for us. And sometimes asking for help, it hurts our pride a little bit, right?
Mhm.
It does make us feel shame. So I absolutely understand what you may have been going through then, because I mean, even, you said that you're an executive and, the breadwinner and all of these things. It can be hard to ask for that help. I've experienced this in some of my businesses when I've been sick. I don't want to let them in on it, because I don't want them to give me less business, or I don't want them to categorize me as someone that can't take on as much. But sometimes we need to open up, and we need to make other people aware of what we are feeling.
Yeah. And I think that the most difficult part is that you don't realize that you need help. And this is one of the reasons I also wanted to have this conversation with you, because as a leader, I was always attuned to what was happening with my team, what was happening in their personal life. Do they
Mm-hmm.
seem like they are not being themselves? And try to tune into what that could be and provide them with the tools. Because when you're in this cycle of depression,
Mm-hmm.
you can't see it for yourself. You can't see that there is something happening, that you are
Yeah.
not yourself. You just, all of a sudden, your light start dimming.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a great point, your eyes. Like if you actually are a good leader, a good teacher, right? Because this is happening more and more in schools, in colleges,
Yes.
uh, even parents, right? Like you know your kids better than anyone, right? And so it's like don't underestimate that gut feeling that something is not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so interesting too to think about teachers being able to pick up on things. I always think back to fifth grade, and just this teacher that was so in tune with us. She did such an incredible job. Her name was Miss Morrison. And I think, when you get to that age, 10, 11, you're kind of those preteen years, your brain does start to change, hormones are shifting, and you're really coming into a different version of yourself. And I've always been spirited. I did the broadcast team in elementary school, so I was on the morning news. I loved to volunteer back then even. And I remember I had this thought one day. and it was the first time in my life ever feeling like this. But I said, what if my personality, something along the lines of, what if my personality is, all for nothing? What if this is just pointless, how I am? And I guess I kind of conducted my own little self-experiment unconsciously. And I said, I'm just going to sit back today, not talk as much as I usually do. I'm just going to keep to myself and keep quiet and just kind of see if anybody notices. And I'll never forget to this day, coming back from lunch, and the teacher on the way in, she grabbed me and she said, I want to talk to you out here. And she just asked, she said, is there anything going on at home? You don't seem like yourself today. And there was nothing going on. I think it was one of those pivotal points in life, one of those inflection points where you're like, you wonder, you question on a deeper level, does this matter? Am I special? We hear in elementary school so often, like, you are special, you're the only you in the entire world. And so her pulling me out, I just told her, I was like, no, nothing's wrong. I'm doing good. I think I'm just tired or something. And I probably was in retrospect. But it was in that moment, just feeling seen and feeling heard, that it was like, I can never do this again. My personality, who I am at the core, it does matter. And I am special. And for a teacher to notice, and when I speak in groups, when I speak at schools, I always donate to the teachers too, because my books, they go from ages 8 to 80. Anyone of any ages from 7, 8 to 80 something years old can enjoy them. So I always make sure to donate to the teachers too, because I just think that teachers do such an incredible job, and they make such a difference, or they have the power, right, to make a difference in the lives of students. And none of us would be where we are today. I'm sure all of us can at least remember at least 2 teachers that had such a prominent impact on who we are today, where we're at, and we will never forget the motivation and encouragement from them.
Yeah, they have a hard job. I go to like one volunteer event a year, and that's like, that is my contribution to this.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys do it all day long, every day.
It's truly like a soulful job. Like they're just angels working overtime for these children.
Yeah.
Truly.
And one of the things that I wanted to bring also awareness, especially since it's May, so let's do it. So when people are depressed and having suicidal thoughts, they probably are going to, at the beginning, try to figure out a way to numb this. And this is where a lot of people might get into an addiction, alcohol or drugs or something else. But I have been making my mission to bring awareness to the most socially accepted addiction that there is. And
I love this.
It's work. People get the same dopamine rush, the same effect, the same numbing mechanism, the same numbing effect that they will get with a drug if they are chemically conditioned to it. And I know that because I became a workaholic. Literally, I couldn't stop, which in turn took me to burn out. Right? But when life was crashing around me, my relationships weren't doing well. Being a mom is about the hardest thing I ever done in my life. You have kids throwing temper tantrums. I had an autistic kid. There was all these things. And so there was one thing I did well, which was work. And so what did I do? I worked more because it made me feel good. And it's not any different than people that go and grab the glass of wine. It's the same thing. And people don't even think about it. It's like, oh, you're such a hard worker. Are you? Are you going to be okay?
Yeah, I find that super interesting because I absolutely identify with this as well. And I've noticed certain patterns in my life, especially post my father working. I just kind of dove into so much. And one thing that I kept noticing was after I would finish a project, even the books that double as journals, right? I would finish that and I'm like, okay, where's the dopamine, on to the next thing. And in an Ed Milet podcast, I forget who he was interviewing, but he spoke about the dopamine lies in the work as you're completing the project. And then it's like dopamine depletion as soon as you're done. Whereas usually people are so happy once they have the final product, and you are, but typically you can't even enjoy what you've completed because you're so addicted to the work that it's immediately on to the next thing, right?
That is 100% accurate. And so I just recently did a TEDx talk, and can you imagine the dopamine rush of leading towards it, going deliver that talk?
Oh
I
my
came back, and I'm aware, which is so powerful, right? Because now I know that I have this
Yeah.
addiction,
Yeah.
and I have the tools to cope with it. But I
Yeah.
came back, and I'm like, what do I do with myself?
Yeah. So much
And
for that.
right. And so the first thing is like, oh, well, you gotta prepare social media content for like the next month. I'm like, no, you don't have to do anything. So I'm like, okay, what I'm gonna do? I'm like, well, I'm gonna clean the house. Except that I was cleaning like a maniac. I was cleaning like my mom was coming to visit.
Yeah.
And when I found myself on my knees scraping the baseboards, I'm like, oh, Carmen.
Yeah, like you just shifted to a different form of work that gives you joy and accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's truly interesting to think about how sometimes it is so hard to just simply be. I mean, I will even be on the beach sometimes, and I'm like, okay, this is not productive unless I read X amount of pages of this book and drink this much water. I'm going to feel accomplished. And it's like, but why do I have to feel accomplished to just simply relax? Why does there have to be any accomplishment in just being? Like, I am enough just as is. And I think that that's where we sometimes as humans struggle, is realizing that we're just enough as is.
Yes. And I think this is a good, segue to your journal and your book, because
Yeah.
it is so, we are not conditioned to see mindfulness as a productive task, right? But
Yes.
what if I tell you, and I'm sure you support me here, that it is about the most productive things you can do? Just spend 10 to 20 minutes grounding, connecting with yourself, acknowledging your thoughts, clearing your mind, and you'll have the
Yes.
best ideas ever.
Oh my gosh, just ideas that are out of this world, honestly. And I always describe them as like downloads from the universe or from source, from God, if you will, just when you sit in that silence. Because how often do we as humans even get to sit in silence now with phones? You mentioned your mother with children, just the hustle and bustle of life, right? So that's where I wanted to create something that really had so many different facets to if somebody wants to journal, they can absolutely come to these books to journal. If they want to read about why meditation is important, why you should limit time on social media, you can do that as well. If you want to habit track, find habits, maybe you're trying to drink less, or maybe you're trying to quit vaping, maybe you're trying to stop scrolling aimlessly. We have habit tracking in there. We also have habit tracking for new habits that you want to pick up. So maybe you want to incorporate exercise into your daily or every other day routine. So there's that as well. There's just so much in here, and it really filled my heart to be able to create these, and seeing the children and teens just absolutely light up when they're gifted one. It makes all of the work that I put into them behind the scenes just so worth it. I can't wait to create more like this. And the manuscript changes from time to time. So sometimes I might, again, with the journaling and self-awareness, I might have an idea, hey, why didn't I write about this in here? I can go back into that manuscript at any point and update them. Like, for instance, the pollination project, for the ones I'm donating, they did have specific requirements that they have to be printed on eco-friendly paper, so recycled paper, which I'm a huge fan of. That makes me feel so incredible knowing that we're not wasting trees. These are eco-friendly, they're recycled, but they also had the requirement that they be vegan friendly. So I was like, wait, what is that? I don't think that there's any, animal byproduct in here. But then I realized on one page, when I suggest food for your mental health, I suggested salmon, those omega fatty
Right.
acids. And I was like, ooh, that is not vegan. So I need to make everything plant-based in there. And will that change? Who knows? Maybe when I'm off of this grant initiative, it absolutely will change. Maybe I might add salmon back, but I appreciated the challenge with them to have this be cohesive with their requirements. I thought it was super fun, friendly as well, because I know, maybe some families don't want to eat meat, but typically something that is universal is fruits and vegetables. So I figured that's very friendly. But yeah, I wish I had one here with me to show you guys,
I
but
know, yes.
I'm waiting on a shipment now to do a donation this week to a group of teens that have all been through something in their childhood, whether that be the loss of a parent, the loss of a sibling, abuse in the home. Maybe they've been in and out of foster homes. So I'm very excited to donate to them. But yeah, I absolutely love doing this. And not many people know that it does derive from what happened to my father, because it is more of like there's certainly like a happy premise rather than a sadness or a rain cloud that follows my work. But, the message is always there. And sometimes I do speak about it, not to the super young groups of children. But yeah, it's there and it's inspired by what happened to him. And so I'm so happy to give back and turn my mess into message.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. And so, how can people contact you or work with you, Carlie?
Yes, so people can contact me at bloomiebrained@gmail.com. You will find that on my blog as well, in the contact portion of the blog. You can contact me through Instagram as well. It's also just at Bloomie Brained. And then the books are for purchase. They're on my blog, but they're also on Amazon. If you have Prime, I think they deliver to you in anywhere from like 2 to 5 days. So yeah.
Beautiful. Oh my God, this conversation, I feel like it was so important to have, to
Oh,
bring awareness and to let people know that, we have to be watching out for the people that we care.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
well, Carlie, it's
Thank you
been a
so much
pleasure
for having me.
to have you in the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'm sure your dad will be so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. That really means the world to me, Carmen. Thank you so much for having me. You did such a beautiful job and you speak so eloquently. So I really appreciate you hosting me and hearing my story.
Thank you. And you guys, until next week, lead intentionally. Bye bye.